They were old, proud, and vast beyond comprehension. The Galactic Empire had stretched its reach across spiral arms, forging dominion over thousands of systems and hundreds of species. For over 90 millennia, its rule had gone uncontested. Systems bent the knee without resistance. Species that dared defy were crushed and rewritten. The Empire believed itself the inevitable end of evolution, a political black hole from which no culture could escape. So when distant sensors detected unknown vessels creeping out from the galactic rim, there was no panic, only protocol. These newcomers were, by default, another primitive branch destined to be catalogued, studied, and absorbed. At first, the signals were confusing. The ships lacked formal identifiers, their languages layered in metaphors, jokes, and illogical phrasing. The Empire's translators struggled. A vessel introduced itself as ISS Banter Class, currently out of coffee. Another simply broadcast static, followed by a recording of classical symphonies merged with strange animal sounds. Empire archivists dismissed it as nonsense, another undisciplined, undeveloped culture not yet blessed by real structure. The idea that such beings had traversed interstellar distances on their own was almost insulting. Fleet Command dispatched a delegation fleet to assert dominance, as they had done countless times before. A mix of battlecruisers, diplomatic envoys, and intimidation arrays, all standard for first contact with pre-integrated civilizations. When the human vessels were first visually confirmed, confusion rippled through the fleet. These were not graceful ships of gleaming alloy and imperial glyphs. They were blunt, rugged, asymmetrical things. Some of the hulls looked welded. Their hull signatures were dirty with radiation leaks, fusion exhaust, and mechanical noise. The galactic officers sneered. To them, these ships were iron coffins, testaments to desperation, not brilliance. The opening communication was condescending by design. A standard address delivered in grand ceremonial dialect, praising the Empire's magnanimity while offering humanity the opportunity to become a protected tributary species. It was a script written in stone across generations. And it had never failed. Until that day. The humans responded, after a long pause, with laughter. Actual, audible laughter. One of their representatives, a grizzled man in a loose uniform, grinned on screen and said, "Did you guys rehearse that in a mirror or something? That was adorable." The Empire was stunned. Empires aren't mocked. They are feared. No species had ever spoken so freely, so carelessly, in the presence of an imperial emissary. Empire analysts scrambled to understand. Perhaps it was cultural misalignment. Perhaps humanity didn't understand the gravity of what stood before them. But then the messages kept coming. Videos of cats riding robotic vacuums. Clips of Terran politicians lip-syncing to musical renditions of alien phrases. Even ancient Earth film clips overlaid with imperial translations to mock the stiffness of their speech. What began as irritation within the fleet quickly shifted towards something else: doubt. Empire officials tried to re-establish order, clarifying their expectations, reiterating the strength of their armada, the penalties for mockery, the superiority of their genetic lineage. But humanity didn't flinch. In fact, they escalated. Responses were riddled with sarcasm, puns, and historical quotes about tyrants and overcompensation. One human even invited the Empire to try invading Earth. "Just remember to bring marshmallows," he added. "We like fireworks." This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Subjugation was usually immediate. Species either cried, knelt, or fired in futile rage. Humanity did none. They laughed. They played. They responded to overwhelming force with irreverence. Empire anthropologists launched emergency probes to Earth, desperate to study the psychological profile of this species. What they found only deepened the mystery. Humanity's history was violent, yes, but strangely self-aware. They made comedies about their own wars. They built machines of peace from instruments of destruction. Their science was equal parts chaos and genius. In 1 century, they leapt from internal combustion to AI-assisted exoplanetary propulsion. No centralized hierarchy. No enforced planetary unison. And yet they launched fleets. Confounded, the Empire ordered a hard scan of the nearest human ship cluster, assuming there had to be more beneath the surface. The results returned hours later and caused quiet panic. The materials were unfamiliar. The energy signatures fluctuated in patterns too erratic to trace. Some sections of the ships phased out under direct scan, as if cloaked or multidimensional. Even stranger, their data packets occasionally piggybacked on Imperial frequencies before returning corrupted, with embedded jokes about their encryption skills. The Empire convened a crisis council. Protocol had failed. Dominance had failed. Humanity did not react predictably. Their technology was crude in parts, but advanced in places that shouldn't be. Their responses were dismissive, not fearful. And their cultural core, whatever drove their behavior, was unlike anything encountered. In the Empire's arrogance, they had looked at Earth and seen a child playing with matches. What they failed to see was the fire already burning behind its eyes. The messages kept coming, but none matched Imperial expectations. Formality was met with irreverence. Where the Empire expected submission, it found casual dismissal. Human responses felt like jokes, yet carried undertones that unsettled even the most seasoned diplomats. Entire fleets debated the possibility that humanity didn't understand the gravity of the situation, but the tone was too calculated to be accidental. Humanity wasn't confused. It was unimpressed. Earth's communications were filled with layered satire, quotes from ancient philosophers, comedians, and war generals all stitched together with unnerving precision. It wasn't madness. It was strategy, chaotic but deliberate. The Empire, built on order and hierarchy, couldn't comprehend it. Alien diplomats were stunned when humans refused to follow ceremonial etiquette, responding instead with laid-back greetings, sarcastic commentary, and even food recipes. One human simply asked if the Empire had a good recipe for chicken tikka masala and then vanished from the transmission. High Command assumed psychological manipulation, believing humanity was hiding fear under humor. But Earth's tone didn't change. They cracked jokes about planetary conquest as if discussing weekend sports. One broadcast featured a human admiral holding a mug that read, "Galactic Overlord in Training." Another pretended to interview a plush alien toy about surrender terms. It wasn't resistance, it was ridicule. Empire analysts tried dissecting human culture in real time, only to spiral into confusion. Humanity worshipped freedom yet tolerated chaos. Their art, music, literature, and history reflected endless conflict, yet also immense creativity. They made comedy from tragedy, and meaning from disorder. This resilience, this laughter in the face of authority, didn't match the psychological profiles of any previously encountered species. Attempts at intimidation were met with dead silence, followed minutes later by edited videos mocking the Empire's military aesthetics. Earth seemed to understand the symbols of fear and chose to flip them inside out. What unnerved the Empire more was how quickly humanity adapted. Human linguists grasped the Empire's dialects within days and responded using them with infuriating ease, often twisting them into satire. The precision was surgical. These weren't blunders. These were strategic provocations. While the Empire deliberated sanctions or escalation, human explorers had already mapped 3 contested sectors. They left probes, automated beacons, and holographic graffiti quoting Shakespeare and Sun Tzu. Not warnings. Statements. One read, "We came, we saw, we brought snacks." Another, "Is this Empire gluten-free?" The audacity wasn't limited to speech. Human ships maneuvered with reckless confidence, darting close to Imperial borders before disappearing. No provocation, no damage, just the hint that they could go wherever they pleased. Tactical simulations began to show gaps in Imperial response protocols. Humans didn't follow patterns. They invented new ones mid-movement. They didn't escalate logically. Their decisions bent around cultural intuition that AI couldn't model. The final blow to Imperial patience came during a live diplomatic summit. A human representative appeared, not in armor or ceremonial robes, but in a hoodie, seated on a rotating chair, sipping a fizzy drink. He smiled, leaned into the camera, and asked, So, do your ships have cup holders, or are you guys still stuck on posture thrones? The Empire ended the call. Silence followed, but Earth didn't press. No military buildup. No threats. Just probes left behind with recordings of laughter and orchestral jazz echoing into deep space. A quiet panic began to form behind closed doors. Imperial arrogance had assumed humans would either submit or attack. They had done neither. They had shown that their minds couldn't be corralled. Their culture couldn't be predicted. Their humor wasn't weakness. It was armor. And what terrified the Empire most wasn't that humanity laughed. It was that they hadn't even started trying. The moment the Imperial vessel fired, everything changed. What was meant as a demonstration, a controlled pulse to disable a human ship, resulted in a silent explosion. The human vessel scattered into thousands of pieces, breaking apart in perfect symmetry. No distress call, no panic. For a few seconds, the Empire believed they had reasserted dominance. Then the fragments turned. Tiny engines ignited. Each shard acted independently, forming a web that encircled the attacker. The debris wasn't destruction. It was a swarm. Within seconds, the Imperial ship's systems flickered. Shields collapsed, communication channels fell to static, and gravity controls reversed intermittently. Dozens of countermeasures launched, only to vanish mid-flight. No external damage was visible, yet the ship drifted aimlessly. Imperial Command couldn't explain how or when the infiltration occurred. The swarm had simply bypassed every defense, acting with precision no AI system could trace. A signal pulsed through the chaos, calm, measured, undeniably human. You fired first. Consider this a reminder. Then silence. The swarm retreated, reforming into a ship identical to the one presumed destroyed. No casualties, no destruction, only humiliation. The Empire panicked. This was not an act of retaliation. It was control. Immediate reviews of human technology began, this time without bias. What surfaced didn't make sense. Human ships lacked consistency. Some used magnetic drives, others used exotic particles yet unnamed in Imperial databases. Their AIs were decentralized, self-modifying, and most alarmingly, partially biological. Code analysis revealed self-evolving patterns. Some ships didn't respond to commands because they weren't machines. They were alive. Empire Tech divisions scrambled to understand, only to discover that even their attempts at digital intrusion were being monitored. One attempt to trace a communication uplink led to a dead-end loop that displayed a dancing figure in a hat labeled "Try again." Hours of wasted processing, and the uplink self-erased with no trace. Worse, every recorded attempt to jam human transmissions failed. Humanity used quantum pulse entanglement to communicate in real time without detectable frequencies. Every Imperial fleet-wide broadcast was intercepted before arriving at its destination and return scrambled, often appended with commentary like, "You left your mic on," or, "This encryption looks like it was written by a toaster." The military doctrine that had served the Empire for millennia began to unravel. Fleet formations, rigid and hierarchical, failed to respond to human tactics that evolved mid-engagement. Human vessels didn't follow orders from a central authority. They moved like a conversation, reactive, instinctive, and utterly unpredictable. Their weapons, though visually archaic, operated on principles beyond kinetic or plasma discharge. Several incidents showed damage patterns inconsistent with known energy signatures. Entire sections of Imperial cruisers went dark without explosions, as if logic itself had failed in those spaces. One battle simulation revealed the depth of human adaptability. An entire squadron was tasked with defending a system using traditional Empire formation logic. A human fleet of fewer ships warped in, performed what appeared to be a chaotic scatter maneuver, then disappeared. The Imperial commander laughed, certain they had fled. 22 seconds later, every control panel across the fleet displayed the same message. "Checkmate in 2." The simulation ended with every Imperial ship disabled. Not destroyed, rendered irrelevant. Even internal morale began to shift. Captains whispered about how human ships anticipated their decisions. Some believed humans were reading minds, others theorized time manipulation. The truth was simpler and more terrifying. Humanity wasn't faster. They were freer. Unchained by protocol, unconcerned with tradition, unburdened by the need to preserve pride. They learned, adapted, and moved without asking permission. One alien observer noted, "They make war like they tell jokes, timing, surprise, and a punchline you never see coming." What shook the Empire wasn't just the scale of defeat. It was that humans treated war like a game. Not carelessly, but confidently. As if they'd already calculated the outcome and were just waiting for the rest of the galaxy to catch up. The Empire tried to recover. Orders were issued, formations restructured, new protocols drafted to contain what they now admitted was a strategic threat. But nothing held. Word of human encounters leaked across the galaxy. Subjugated systems, long silent under Imperial law, began asking questions. Whispers turned into transmissions. Footage of the disabled cruiser surrounded by a human swarm was shared among border colonies, followed by archived audio of humans laughing in defiance. It spread not through networks, but through people, passed between hands, replayed in taverns, retransmitted from hidden satellites. For centuries, the Empire had ruled by inevitability. It conquered not just by strength, but by the belief that resistance was pointless. Humanity shattered that illusion without formal war. In every system touched by human probes, locals found messages offering help, knowledge, or simply conversations. No threats. No demands. Just questions, personal, open-ended, and real. "What do you need? What do you dream about? Do you still remember your own name?" Species that had forgotten how to hope suddenly remembered. And once that spark returned, it spread faster than fleets ever could. Desperation drove the Empire to act decisively. They dispatched the royal flagship, bearing the Emperor himself, to confront humanity directly. A final attempt to demonstrate control, to force terms. But humanity didn't meet them with dread. A council of representatives received the Emperor not with ceremony, but with plain language and uncomfortable honesty. No gifts, no pomp, just a simple question. "Why do you think you still matter?" The Emperor spoke of legacy, of sacrifice, of maintaining balance across chaos. The humans listened politely, then responded, not with insults, but with facts. They listed colonies erased, species stripped of culture, and knowledge censored into obedience. One human, a former xenoarchaeologist turned diplomat, quietly said, "You didn't bring order. You just buried alternatives." The Emperor threatened consequences. He was met with data. Human AI displayed energy schematics showing that their fleets could generate micro-wormholes capable of folding entire battlecruisers into singularities. They didn't boast. They just informed. The message wasn't dominance, it was finality. The Empire no longer held the upper hand, and everyone knew it. In response, regions under Imperial rule began to disconnect. Communications from outer systems ceased. Governors vanished. Some were overthrown. Others simply walked away. The fear that once held the galactic structure in place had been replaced with something more volatile: faith in change. Earth's influence wasn't rooted in military occupation. It came from the absence of coercion. No one was forced to comply. Humanity offered alternatives and left the decision open. That terrified the Empire more than any weapon. Meanwhile, human vessels continued to appear in unexpected places: ancient ruins, contested asteroid fields, forgotten outposts. Not to claim, but to learn. They asked locals to explain their cultures. They brought supplies without demanding loyalty. One former Imperial vassal later wrote, "The humans didn't try to own us. They tried to understand us. That's what made us trust them." Former allies of the Empire, watching the shift in momentum, began switching sides. Not through declarations, through silence. When the Empire called for reinforcements, few responded. When demands were made, excuses followed. The machinery of domination slowed until it collapsed from inside. Humanity did not rush to fill the void. Instead, they set up neutral zones where species could discuss governance without oversight. They introduced shared archives, opened free academies, and translated entire libraries into hundreds of dialects. The goal wasn't control. It was curiosity. For the first time, empires were not dictating the future, civilizations were building it together. The empire, once the center of everything, became a shadow of itself. Its capital remained, but its grip slipped. Its commanders faded into exile or disgrace. Some even requested asylum on Earth, not out of fear, but admiration for what humans had created. What ended the empire wasn't a fleet or a weapon. It was the realization that the people it ruled no longer believed in its purpose. And once that belief died, its fall was only a matter of time. They still talk about it in hushed tones, those first strange broadcasts that echoed through the outer colonies. Most who heard them didn't understand. A language of contradiction, humor mixed with defiance, simplicity masking power. At the time, no one believed it would matter. Earth was just a distant oddity at the edge of relevance. No central government, no known alliances, no claim to territory. Just scattered transmissions and peculiar ships that didn't obey known flight patterns. But everything changed when the laughter started to make sense. Decades passed, and what began as anomaly became blueprint. The old imperial systems, once synonymous with inevitability, had vanished. What remained were stories, accounts told in marketplaces, in classrooms, in orbit above newly independent worlds. They spoke of how humanity never declared war, never demanded allegiance, never even claimed to lead. They simply arrived, observed, and left questions behind that couldn't be ignored. The new generation barely remembers the empire. They know the scars it left, the hushed bitterness of those who lived through it, but they don't live in fear. Instead, they grow up around strange monuments left by human architects, structures made not to impress but to teach. Libraries that expand daily with contributions from 100 species. Translation hubs that allow entire worlds to speak freely for the first time in history. A galactic internet seeded by Earth, where censorship is a puzzle that fails before it begins. It's not just the technology. It's the philosophy that stuck. Humanity, by simply being itself, challenged every assumption the galaxy held about power. They didn't conquer. They questioned. They didn't unify by force. They created shared meaning by inviting others to laugh with them, to imagine something better than survival. And when others tried to emulate them, they didn't gatekeep the process. They encouraged it, improved it, iterated with those once called enemies. Some say it was their unpredictability that gave them the edge. Others claim it was their refusal to accept inevitability. But the truth is simpler. Humans didn't see the galaxy as a ladder to climb or a battlefield to win. They saw it as a story, and they insisted on writing their own chapter. Across former imperial strongholds, festivals now commemorate the moment humans arrived. Not as saviors, but as catalysts. Sculptures of old human ships, ugly, asymmetric, functional, are displayed beside holograms of ancient Terran media. Children watch old Earth animations, quote comedic sketches in languages once banned, and learn math from programs created by human teachers with oddly timed jokes. They don't see humans as conquerors. They see them as proof that history isn't set in stone. That anything, even an empire's end, can begin with a laugh. Those who lived through the shift describe it not as a war, but as an unraveling. The moment when truth, long buried under ceremony and fear, resurfaced because someone dared to ask why things had to stay the same. And the ones who asked weren't gods or machines. They were fallible, strange, loud, and contradictory. They were human. In the deepest corners of the galaxy, where old imperial sensors once monitored silence, new signals pulse, educational modules, collaborative simulations, musical exchanges. The fingerprints of Earth remain not in domination, but in shared understanding. The tools they left behind weren't weapons. They were frameworks. Ways of thinking that could survive without them, expand without control, thrive without hierarchy. Even now, Earth doesn't rule. Its ships move between stars like wandering philosophers, offering aid, sharing curiosity, then moving on. No banners. No demands. Only questions. What remains is not an empire. It's a conversation that never ends. A living, chaotic, beautiful mosaic that adapts with every species added to it. And at its center is the memory of the ones who laughed first, who saw tyranny not as destiny but as something too absurd to be taken seriously. The galaxy didn't need a conqueror. It needed someone who refused to play by its rules. And humanity just happened to enjoy breaking them.